Hi everyone, welcome to this month's masterclass. I've brought you to Makins Fishery today. Behind me, it's absolutely stunning. Lake 4 I think it's called. And for this month's masterclass, we're going to talk through pole shallow for carp. Now, I'm a bit rusty. I haven't done it for a few years, so what we're going to do, we're going to head over to the gear now and let's see if I can remember how to do it. Normally, I've got a really good idea, bait, best way of going about it, but the nice thing about coming here today is I know there's loads of carp in this lake from when we were doing the children's, what's it called, academy now. I know there's loads of carp in here, but I don't know what rig's going to be best, and I don't know the best bait or the best way of feeding. So I'm going to start what I think will be good today given the conditions. I'm going to talk you through both ways of carp shallow fishing and breaking it down. Part one is fishing underneath your pole tip and slapping your rig, and then part two is a long line rig, fishing past your bait. Biggest thing is the conditions. It's windy today, we've got a lot of wind on the water, so our second rig, our long line flicking rig, probably not going to be the best one. But if we come and it was flat, calm, bright, no wind at all, then our long line flick rig will probably be the best. But the conditions change as well, so just changing with it. So I'm going to start off on, I've got me 3 different shallow rigs, or me 3 different sort of, what are they called now? Like bristled float rigs. And the biggest thing, what I've got to be wary of is the conditions. So if my line's too short, I'm going to be twitching my float all of the time. Likewise, if my line's too long, then I'm not going to be able to control my rig. So my first rig, I'm going to start sort of just over 2 foot. If I'm not getting any bites, I can always deepen up. If I start missing bites, I can always shallow up. And then I've got about 2 and a bit foot of line. So hopefully, looking at the conditions, this is probably going to be my best rig. Now, unlike when we're fishing for F1s, when you normally get some bites from carp, they don't tend to vary a lot. So I'm going to start off with, put my glasses on to make it a little bit easier for me to see. Now I'm going to start off with a 6mm on the hook and feeding some 6mm. The reason being, from what I know about this lake when the academy was here, there's lots of bream, big carp, there's some roach as well. You know, not everything's a nice stamp in here. So by starting off hopefully on 6mm, I'm not too selective. So when it comes to distance, hand on heart, the longer you can fish, the better. But I'd much rather fish a little bit shorter well than too far and my pole waggling all over the show. So I'm just going to go roughly about halfway down my 16-metre section. I've got a short 4-inch, so hopefully that's going to stiffen my pole up a little bit. And I'm going to start here, and then I can go a little bit further depending on how I'm feeling at this distance. So go out, slap my rig 3 times, then get my catapult ready. Just see how I feel at this distance to start with. See if I can control my pole, and flick a few pellets. I don't know if that was a little sign. Flick literally 2 or 3 pellets to start with. One of the biggest things when you're carp fishing, unlike your F1 fishing, well, I say the biggest thing with your carp fishing, depending on what venue you go to. So when you come to old lakes like here at Makins, Gold Valley, Meadowlands, where all the fish are big and the weights are good, but they're massive, if that makes sense. A lot of the time when you're feeding, it's almost like a token gesture. Whereas when you go to venues that are absolutely solid, like Todber Manor, it's totally different. The weights are massive, but the fish are a lot smaller on average. And they will sit in your peg and eat because they're quite new fish. So there's a bite. So that was a brilliant start. And all I've been doing, literally just whilst I've been sat here, is pinging 2 or 3 pellets just to try and get an odd fish milling around in the area. Unlike when we're filming for our F1 fishing, the fish will sit in your peg. Whereas with this, you're not going to be getting hundreds and hundreds of bites. So just hopefully by pinging a few pellets, I can get an odd fish there. But otherwise, we might be sat here for a good half an hour, 40 minutes before we even get a bite. So again, unlike our F1 fishing, when we're doing this, we're not going to be getting millions and millions of bites. I'd say the fish probably average £8. So if you catch 20 fish, there's £160. And a lot of the time when you're on these sort of older carp waters, that is normally a colossal weight. So it's my first fish, so it'd be interesting to see where he's hooked. Now, one thing that you might notice, when I'm playing the carp, I play them differently than most people. If I pull it up here with a long kit, the fish is going to be coming up a long way away from myself. Now, I've done this a lot and I trust my top kits. I haven't broke any doing this, but what you'll see is the fact that I pull the elastic, he's not actually fighting, is I pull the elastic and I generally hold it here. For the reason being is the fish comes up a lot closer to me. But if you're going to do this, just be wary. I don't want you snapping your top kits, you know, don't put them under too much pressure. It just makes them a lot easier for me for the fact that the fish come up a lot closer. It's just starting to wake up a little bit now. So again, just pull a little bit of elastic out. One thing when you're doing this is just take your time. I can't stress how important that is. When I was going to Gold all of the time, all of the venues that you go to in terms of winning, it's so tight and it's easy to get sort of carried away, especially hopefully if we start hooking a few great big ones. It's easy to get sort of pulling them too hard. Just don't, take your time. But it's our first fish, so what I need to know now, because I've slapped my rig over, wasn't really concentrating, I don't know when I got my bite, so it'd be interesting to see where the fish is hooked. So look at where he's hooked. He's hooked in basically perfect, to be honest, the bottom of the corner of the mouth. So if anything, I might be able to shallow my rig up slightly. So quite a small fish, probably £5 I would have thought, for making standards. Great big and just stuck his head out. You can tap two ways. You can either go across your leg and your arm and basically sort of shake your hand and tap the water like so. You can do it like that. And just trying to literally just tap the water. It don't look right. I'm not actually fed a thing yet. But that shows you how tuned in they are to noise. So hopefully we can get this one out. I can't believe that. We literally just had to go on our flick rig, long line rig, and you cannot get a bite because you can't hold your rig still. But that shows you how tuned in they are to noise. You basically just aggravated one on the hook. Some people frown upon it, but when it's right, if you don't do it, as daft as it sounds, you won't win. It's just like mugging, you know. Some people don't like that, but what I always say is if you're serious about winning, you've got to do whatever it needs to be done, as long as the rules allow it. But when you're fishing for these big carp, when I used to go to Gold, you know, back when I was a lot younger, your feeding is almost like a sort of token gesture. You're almost feeding more for you, I think, thinking, oh, he's running off. Thinking, well, if I feed a little bit, you know, I might be able to catch a few more. Oh, hang about, he's off on one. Stop it, Mr. Carp. Don't spoil it. They do love to run off a bit. Don't know if he's going to carry on or not. Try and, hopefully, if I can get my pole above it, sort of make it kite, you know, because if you keep your pole low, when they're pulling, they're swimming away from you. But sometimes you can get the pole above them, when they're swimming, they go into the surface and then they turn. It's not always, you know. That's why I like F1 fishing, because they don't put me gear for all of this. But anyway, back onto the fishing. The feeding side of it is almost, I think, more in your mind than anything else. Oh, well, if I feed a little bit, you know, makes you feel better, like you're attracting one into your peg. But the biggest thing when you're doing this style of fishing is noise. Just like our waggler fishing, the person that casts the most normally catches the most. Reason being, noise. The more time the float lands, the more noise you're making, so the more chance you've got of actually getting a bite. So the fact that this one's gone a little bit scatty when I've hooked it, you'll notice that I'm waiting a little bit. I'm just taking my time. You know, what are you doing, Carl? I think that's fine. What I don't want to do is break off and it run me that way. I'd rather just leave my pole together, because if it's together and it runs off, I can easily chase it out. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop that section this side, because then I can push me 4 and my 5 there. So if I need it, I know where it is. But hopefully this just sums up what noise is when you're fishing for big carp. Again, when, you know, last I would say 18 months, one of the biggest things has just literally been slapping an 8mm pellet, and you hardly feed it. It's almost, I'm not saying it's pointless feeding, but you're sort of feeding, I think, sometimes more because it makes more sense to you. And you think, well, I can't just go out and not feed a thing. But sometimes feeding is the worst thing you can do. But where this is allowed, honestly, and it's not like tapping for F1s. With F1s, you can definitely spook them because it's different. You're feeding the fish into your peg. With this, you haven't got any fish in your peg. They're just swimming around out there, and you just keep tapping the water almost incessantly. Sort of tap, 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 tap for a while, stop tapping, lift your float up and drop it back in. And then you start your tapping process again. Again, big fish. And this is exactly the same as your normal fishing. So once I get it in, fingers crossed, I don't want to jinx myself. It's so important with this to look where he's hooked, because with this I'm suspending a rig, and I need to get my words out today. I need to suspend my bait at the depth that the fish are coming in. It's pointless me fishing at 3 foot, tapping my pole if the fish are coming in higher than that, because you're not going to catch them like that. Oh, that is a great big absolute unit. He's like me, short and fat. So where it looked where he's hooked smack there, which is absolutely perfect. But if I was fishing, so I hooked it here or down the throat, when this is right, I'd set up more rigs, almost like me F1 fishing, and alternate the depths. But with this, it's so important that when you catch them, that it's from there. You do not want to hook them really down the throat or in the bottom of the mouth.